The alarm screamed through the bridge of the U.S. Indomitable, cutting through the quiet of deep space like a knife. Captain Day One sat up straight in his chair, his eyes sharp and focused. The red warning lights painted everything in blood-colored shadows. "Report," he said. His voice was calm, the way it always was before hell broke loose. Lieutenant Han worked at her station, fingers flying across the controls. "Distress signal, sir. Coming from Viridian 7, about 3 light-years from our position. It's a Galactic Council colony." Day One stood and walked to the main display. The signal data scrolled across the screen in alien script, but the translation was clear enough. Someone was dying out there, and they were begging for help. "How many people?" he asked. 40,000 civilians, sir. 12 different species. The signal says they're under attack by the Krethak swarm." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew about the swarm. They were the nightmares that lived in the dark between stars. They consumed everything in their path, leaving nothing but dead worlds and silence behind them. Hana continued reading the data. "Sir, the signal includes tactical information. The swarm has established a full blockade. 6 battlecruisers, 40 destroyers, and at least 200 fighter craft. The Council has already sent 17 rescue missions. All of them failed. None of the ships made it back." Day One studied the numbers. His ship was strong, but it was just one ship. The swarm had an entire fleet. By every logical calculation, going to Viridian 7 was suicide. "Change course," he said. "Plot a jump to Viridian 7. The helmsman, a young officer named Subin, turned in her seat. "Sir, we haven't received orders from command. This sector isn't our jurisdiction." "I gave you an order, Subin." "Yes, sir." Her hands moved to the controls, but Day One could see the fear in her eyes. He didn't blame her. What he was asking them to do was insane. Hannah stood from her station and walked over to him. She kept her voice low, meant only for him. "Day One, we can't fight that fleet alone. We'll be destroyed before we even reach the planet." "I know." "Then why are we going?" Day One looked at the distress signal still playing on the screen. Somewhere out there, 40,000 people were waiting for help that might never come. Children were crying. Parents were dying. And the galaxy was too afraid to do anything about it. "Because someone has to," he said. The ship's communication system crackled to life. A new voice filled the bridge, high-pitched and trembling. It was one of the Council representatives, an insectoid species called the Veltari. The translator struggled with their clicking language, but the fear came through clearly. "Human vessel, this is Council Representative Kilter. We detected your course change. You must not approach Viridian 7. The situation is beyond hope. The swarm cannot be defeated. Please, turn back. We cannot afford to lose another ship." Day One activated the communication panel on his chair. "Representative, this is Captain Day One of the Indomitable. We received your distress call. We're coming to help." "You don't understand." The alien's voice cracked with desperation. "The swarm is too strong. 17 ships have already died trying to break the blockade. Good people, brave people. Their sacrifice changed nothing. What can one human ship possibly do?" Day One smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. "Representative, has anyone ever told you about Earth? I know it's classified as a death world. Your gravity is crushing. Your diseases are deadly. Your animals are monsters. What does this have to do with? It means we evolved in hell." Day One interrupted. "And hell taught us how to fight. The swarm won't see us coming because they think like you do. They think logically. They calculate odds. They expect their enemies to be reasonable. And humans aren't reasonable? Not when civilians are dying." Day One cut the communication. Hana returned to her weapons station. She pulled up the tactical display and studied the swarm's formation. If we're really doing this, we need a plan. A straight approach will get us killed in minutes. I know. Day One called up his own tactical screen. He had fought in the resource wars on Earth, back when humanity was busy trying to kill itself over water and minerals. He had learned something important during those years. Overwhelming force was good, but overwhelming fear was better. We're not going to fight fair, he said. Get me Sergeant Tae Yang. A few moments later, the communication screen showed the face of the ship's Marine commander. Tae had scars across his cheek and a look in his eyes that said he had seen too much death to be afraid of it anymore. Captain, Tae Yang said, I heard we're flying into a suicide mission. Not suicide, Day One corrected. Just extremely dangerous. How many Marines do we have combat ready? 40, sir. All equipped and angry. Good. I'm going to need you to do something the Galactic Council won't approve of. Taeyang's scarred face split into a grin. My favorite kind of mission. What do you need? I need you to make the swarm afraid. Understood, sir. We'll show them what Deathworlders do. The communication ended. Day One stood and looked around his bridge. Every officer was watching him, waiting to see what impossible order would come next. Listen up, he said. The galaxy thinks we're barbarians. They think we're too violent, too aggressive, too comfortable with death. They're not wrong. Earth made us into weapons just by being our home. Today, we're going to use that. The swarm expects a rescue mission. They expect ships that will try to negotiate, that will follow rules, that will die politely. We're going to give them something they've never faced before. What's that, sir? Su Bin asked. Humans who are done being polite. Day One sat back in his command chair. Hannah, load nuclear torpedoes. Target the swarm's supply depot on the moon. Su Bin, prepare for atmospheric entry. I want us to look like debris when we hit their sensor range. Nuclear weapons are banned by Council treaty, sir, Hana said quietly. The Council isn't here. We are. Day One leaned forward. Those people on Meridian 7 sent the distress signal. They asked for help. They didn't ask for kindness. They didn't ask for mercy. They asked someone to save them. That's what we're going to do. The Indomitable turned in space, its engines flaring to life. Behind them, the safe patrol route disappeared. Ahead of them, death and darkness waited Dot, and Captain Day One smiled. The swarm had no idea what was coming. The swarm supply depot sat on Meridian 7's largest moon like a tumor on healthy flesh. Massive and organic, it pulsed with bioluminescent lights as ships came and went, feeding the blockade that strangled the planet below. The swarm felt safe here. Nothing had threatened them in 3 weeks. Nothing would. They were wrong. The first nuclear torpedo hit the depot's northern section at 0.03 seconds past midnight, station time. The explosion turned night into day, a miniature sun blooming where the depot had stood. The second torpedo hit 3 seconds later, then the third, then the fourth. By the time the swarm sensors understood what was happening, half their supply infrastructure was burning debris spreading across the lunar surface. Aboard the Indomitable, Hana watched the explosions with cold satisfaction. All torpedoes on target, sir. Depot is destroyed. Swarm communications are going crazy. Captain Day One studied the tactical display. The swarm fleet was already moving, trying to reorganize their formations and locate the attacker. Good. Confusion was the first step. How long until they figure out where we are? He asked. Unknown, sir. The debris field is interfering with their sensors. We have maybe 10 minutes before that's enough time. Day One turned to his engineer. Jae-min, execute the ghost protocol. Engineer Jae-min looked up from his station, his face pale. Sir, that's extremely dangerous. If we vent the reactor coolant without proper shutdown procedures, we could cause a cascade failure. I'm aware of the risks. Do it anyway. Jamin's hands shook as he entered the commands. Throughout the ship, warning alarms began to sound. The reactor temperature spiked, then dropped rapidly as superheated coolant vented into space. On every swarm sensor screen, the Indomitable's heat signature vanished. To their instruments, the human ship had just exploded. Coolant vented, Jamin reported. Heat signature at 0. We're running on emergency battery power. We have 6 hours before systems start failing. More than enough. Day 1 leaned forward in his chair. Subin, take us into the planet's atmosphere. Use the debris field as cover. Make us look like another piece of wreckage. The young pilot's hands were steady now. Fear had a way of disappearing when you were too busy to think about it. Yes, sir. Adjusting trajectory. Entry angle set for maximum stealth. The Indomitable drifted through the expanding cloud of debris from the moonbase. Just another piece of metal tumbling toward the planet. The swarm destroyers passed within kilometers, but their sensors read nothing. The human ship was a ghost, silent and cold. Inside the ship, the crew worked in dim emergency lighting. The air grew colder as life support systems reduced to minimum power. But nobody complained. They were soldiers from Earth, from a world that tried to kill them every day. A little cold was nothing. Approaching upper atmosphere, Subin announced. Swarm picket ships are everywhere, but they're not looking at us. They think we're debris from the depot explosion. Maintain course. Take us down to the colony's location. The ship shuddered as it hit atmosphere. Metal groaned under stress. Warning lights flickered across every console. But Subin kept them steady, using gravity and orbital mechanics instead of engines. Falling like a stone wrapped in fire, on the surface of Viridian 7, in a fortified shelter beneath the colony's main habitat. 40,000 civilians huddled in darkness. They had been hiding for 3 weeks. Food was running out. Hope had already gone. A Veltari mother held her children close, their small bodies trembling with fear. She had heard the explosions from the moon. Everyone had. But she knew it changed nothing. Help wasn't coming. Help never came. Then the ground shook. Not from swarm weapons, but from something landing hard just outside the colony perimeter. The civilians looked at each other in confusion and terror. What now? Sergeant Taeyang hit the ground before the drop pod's door had fully opened. His combat armor was scratched and dented from a dozen previous battles, each scar a story he would never tell. Behind him, 39 more Marines deployed in perfect formation, weapons ready. Spread out, Taeyang ordered through the squad communication channel. Teams Alpha and Bravo secure the shelter entrance. Charlie and Delta set up perimeter defenses. Echo Team, you're with me. We're going hunting. One of the younger Marines, a woman named Baora, checked her weapons ammunition counter. Sarge, the tactical display shows at least 200 swarm warriors between us and the shelter. Those are bad odds. Taeyang looked at her, his scarred face showing no emotion. Only bad if you're trying to be fair. We're not here to be fair. We're here to win. The Marines moved through the ruined colony like shadows. The swarm had torn apart most of the buildings, looking for hiding civilians. Perfect. Ruins made good ambush points. Taeyang led Echo team through a collapsed structure that used to be a school. Children's drawings still decorated one wall, now covered in dust and blood. He pushed down the anger that threatened to cloud his thinking. Anger could wait. Right now, he needed to be cold. Contact, one Marine whispered. 20 swarm warriors, moving in formation toward our position. Let them come. Taeyang primed a cluster of proximity mines and placed them carefully in the doorway. Then he and his team moved to elevated positions, Weapons aimed at the kill zone below. The swarm warriors entered the building with confidence. Why wouldn't they? They had destroyed every force sent against them. They were the apex predators of this sector. The mines detonated with a roar that shook the building's skeleton. The lead warriors disappeared in fire and shrapnel. The ones behind them scattered, confused and wounded. They had never faced enemies who used such brutal, efficient tactics. That confusion lasted exactly 4 seconds before the Marines opened fire. Taeyang's rifle barked in controlled bursts. Each shot found a target. Around him, his team worked with the same cold efficiency. This wasn't war the way the galaxy understood it. This was extermination. When the shooting stopped, 20 swarm warriors lay dead. The Marines reloaded and moved on without a word. There was no celebration, no emotion. Just the next objective. Back on the Indomitable, Day 1 monitored the Marine team's progress. Hannah, how many swarm warriors are between Taeyang and the shelter? Down to 80, sir. The Marines are cutting through them faster than the swarm can respond. Good. Day 1 activated the communication channel to Taeyang. Sergeant, be advised. 3 swarm battlecruisers are moving toward your position. They figured out something's happening on the ground. Taeyang's voice came back, calm despite the sound of weapons fire in the background. Understood, sir. How long until they arrive? 15 minutes. More than enough time. The channel went silent, except for the steady rhythm of gunfire. Dr. Eunji listened to the communication from the ship's medical bay. She was prepping equipment for casualties that would inevitably come. Bandages, surgical tools, emergency stims. All laid out with practiced efficiency. A junior medic watched her work. Doctor, shouldn't we be afraid? The swarm is coming, and we're one ship against their entire fleet. Eunji didn't look up from her preparations. Fear doesn't help injured Marines. Skill does. Focus on your job and let the captain worry about the swarm. On the surface, Taeyang and his Marines reached the shelter entrance. Swarm warriors surrounded it, trying to burn through the reinforced doors. The civilians inside were minutes away from death. Echo team, Taeyang said quietly. Chemical smoke, Patton Delta. Everyone else, prepare to rush on my mark. The Marines launched smoke grenades. But this wasn't normal smoke. It was a chemical mixture designed for Earth's atmosphere, full of compounds that were harmless to humans, but absolutely toxic to the swarm's respiratory system. The warriors began to choke and panic, their formation breaking apart. Now, Taeyang said. The Marines erupted from cover, hitting the disorganized swarm warriors with overwhelming violence. It was over in seconds. The area around the shelter entrance became a graveyard. Taeyang approached the shelter door and activated the external communication system. This is Sergeant Taeyang of the United Earthship Indomitable. We're here to get you out. Open the door. Inside, the Voltari mother held her children tighter. She didn't understand. Humans were supposed to be merchants and explorers, peaceful members of the galactic community. The voice on the speaker sounded like death itself, but the door opened anyway. Because death was better than the swarm, and sometimes death came to rescue you. The 3 swarm battlecruisers descended through Viridian 7's atmosphere like falling mountains. Each one was twice the size of the Indomitable, covered in organic armor and bristling with bioweapons. They came to crush the human infestation, to show these primitive Deathworlders what real power looked like. Captain Day 1 watched them approach on the tactical display. His crew waited for orders, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. The logical move was to run. 3 battlecruisers against 1 damaged frigate? The math was simple. Subin, Day 1 said calmly. Plot an intercept course with the lead battlecruiser. Maximum acceleration. The helmsman turned to look at him. Sir, did you say intercept? You heard correctly. Captain, they outmass us by a factor of 5. A direct collision would, I know what it would do. Execute the order. Subin's hands moved across the controls. The Indomitable's engines, barely cooled from their atmospheric entry, roared back to life. The ship accelerated toward the lead battlecruiser, picking up speed with every second. Hannah stood at her weapon station, watching the collision course with wide eyes. Day 1. We can't survive a ramming attack. Our hull was designed to punch through asteroid fields during mining operations. It's reinforced durasteel, 3 meters thick at the prow. Theirs is organic armor, designed to flex and absorb energy weapons. Day 1's hands gripped the arms of his command chair. Sometimes, old-fashioned physics beats advanced biology. The swarm battlecruiser tried to adjust its position, but it was too late. Capital ships were powerful but slow to maneuver. The Indomitable came at it like a spear thrown by an angry god. Brace for impact. Day 1 shouted. The collision was thunder and lightning wrapped in metal screaming. The Indomitable's reinforced prow smashed into the battlecruiser's midsection, tearing through organic armor like paper. The human ship's momentum carried it forward, cleaving the alien vessel in two. Behind them, the battlecruiser broke apart, its pieces tumbling toward the planet's surface in flames. On the Indomitable's bridge, warning alarms screamed. Structural integrity was at 40%. Hull breaches on 3 decks. Emergency bulkheads sealing automatically. But they were still flying. Damage report, Day 1 said, his voice steady despite the chaos. J-Man worked frantically at his console. Sir, we've lost the forward torpedo tubes. Hull plating is cracked along the prow. Reactor is stable, but we're leaking coolant again. If we take another hit like that, we won't. Subin, evasive pattern Omega. Hannah, target the closest battlecruiser with everything we have left. The Indomitable twisted through the sky like a dancer, pulling G-forces that would have killed any other species. Subin's hands flew across the controls, her fear transformed into pure focus. Inside the ship, loose objects became projectiles. The artificial gravity struggled to compensate, but humans were built for high gravity. Earth's crushing weight had forged them into creatures that could endure what others couldn't. The crew stayed conscious while their alien counterparts would have blacked out or died. On the ground, Sergeant Taeyang watched the aerial battle through his helmet's enhanced optics. Wow, he said to his team. The captain's lost his mind. Good for him. Around him, the Marines were setting up defensive positions around the shelter. 40,000 civilians were starting to emerge, blinking in the daylight, hardly able to believe they were still alive. The Valtari mother, who had held her children in the dark, now watched human soldiers work. They moved with brutal efficiency, turning the ruined colony into a fortress. They set traps, established firing lanes, and prepared for the next wave with the calm certainty of people who lived in death's shadow and refused to blink. One of her children, a small creature named Kilsin, tugged at her arm. Mother, why do the humans look so calm? Aren't they afraid? She had no answer. How could she explain something she didn't understand herself? Taeyang overheard the question. He knelt down beside the child, his scarred face somehow less frightening up close. We're terrified, he said simply. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. We just don't let it make decisions for us. But you're from a death world, Kilson said. Aren't you used to danger? Being used to danger doesn't mean you stop being afraid. It means you know how to work while you're scared. Taeyang stood and adjusted his rifle. Now stay behind the barricades. Things are about to get loud. He was right. The swarm warriors, enraged by the destruction of their battlecruiser, poured out of the surrounding ruins like water from a broken dam. Hundreds of them, claws and bioweapons ready, charging toward the human position. Here they come, Taeyang said into the squad channel. Remember, controlled bursts, watch your sectors, and don't waste ammunition on bodies that are already down. Make every shot count. The Marines opened fire. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar that echoed across the dead colony. Swarm warriors fell by the dozens, but more kept coming. They were relentless, driven by instinct and the commands of their distant queen. But the humans were more than relentless. They were methodical. When the first wave reached the barricades, the Marines switched to close combat. Taeyang's rifle became a club, then a stabbing weapon when the stock broke. Around him, his soldiers fought with anything they could find. Knives, bare hands, pieces of debris turned into improvised weapons. The swarm had never faced enemies like this. Species that fought with honor, with rules, with some sense of when to retreat. But humans? They fought like the universe owed them a debt. And they were here to collect with interest.bo-ra. The young Marine who had questioned their odds earlier found herself face to face with a swarm warrior twice her size. Its claws slashed at her, tearing through her armor's shoulder plating. She felt hot blood running down her arm. She smiled. Pain meant she was still alive. Her combat knife found the warrior's throat. It went down gurgling, and she was already moving to the next target. Fear was still there, screaming in the back of her mind, but her training was louder. Above them, the Indomitable continued its deadly dance with the two remaining battle cruisers. Hana had emptied every weapons bay, every missile tube, every defensive turret. The ship was effectively toothless now, running on fumes and spite. "Captain," she said, "we're out of ammunition." "All of it?" Day One watched the tactical display. One battlecruiser was crippled, limping away with a trail of debris behind it. The other was still combat capable, turning to face them for a killing blow. "Su Bin, how much fuel do we have left?" The pilot checked her instruments. "Enough for maybe 2 more high-G maneuvers, sir." "Then let's make them count." Day One opened a communication channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the captain. We're about to do something stupid. Again, hold on to something solid and pray to whatever gods you believe in. We're going to win this fight, even if we have to do it the hard way." He turned to Su Bin. "Take us straight at them. Full burn. When I give the word, flip us around and hit maximum reverse thrust." Su Bin understood immediately. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was exactly the kind of thing a Deathworlder would think of. The Indomitable accelerated directly toward the battlecruiser. The swarm ship charged its bioweapons, preparing to tear the human vessel apart. They were certain of victory. How could they lose? At the last possible moment, Su Bin executed the flip. The Indomitable spun on its axis and fired its engines at full power. The wash of superheated plasma caught the battlecruiser head-on. Organic armor, designed to flex and absorb energy weapon fire, couldn't handle the raw thermal output of a ship's main engines at point-blank range. The battlecruiser's forward sections boiled away. Internal fluids flashed to steam. The ship's own biosystems turned against it, spreading fire throughout its corridors. The Indomitable pulled away, its engines sputtering and dying. They were dead in the water now, floating helplessly above the planet. But the battlecruiser was falling, trailing smoke and screaming its death across the sky. On the ground, Taeyang watched the burning wreckage fall beyond the horizon. The swarm warriors around his position suddenly stopped fighting. Their connection to the command structure had been severed. They stood confused, leaderless. The Marines didn't hesitate. In 30 seconds, it was over. Taeyang looked around at his team. They were covered in blood, some of it their own. Armor was torn. Weapons were empty or broken. But they were standing. The civilians were safe behind them, staring with a mixture of gratitude and horror. "Good work," Taeyang said simply. "Now let's find that queen everyone keeps talking about." We've got unfinished business. Because humans from Earth didn't just win battles. They finished what they started, and somewhere deep beneath the colony, in tunnels that had never seen light, the Swarm Queen felt something she had never experienced in 3 centuries of life. She felt fear. The entrance to the Swarm Queen's nest was a wound in the earth, pulsing with bioluminescent light and leaking a smell that made even hardened Marines want to retch. According to the colony's geological surveys, the tunnel system stretched for kilometers underground, carved by the swarm over 3 weeks of occupation. Captain Day 1 stood at the entrance with Sergeant Tae Yang, looking down into darkness that seemed to have its own weight. The Indomitable was still in orbit, crippled but functional enough to provide communication and sensor support. Every other human on the planet was here, standing at the edge of hell. 40 Marines, Day 1 said quietly, against whatever's down there. 41, Tae Yang corrected. You're coming with us. I'm the ship's captain. I should stay with respect, sir. The ship isn't going anywhere. And we both know how this works. Leaders lead from the front. That's the Earth way. Day 1 smiled despite the situation. When did you get philosophical, Sergeant? Must be the impending death making me sentimental. Tae Yang checked his weapon for the 3rd time. Besides, we need every gun we can get. The Queen's gotta have at least 1,000 warriors down there protecting her. Dr. Yoonji approached them, carrying a field medical kit that looked too heavy for her small frame. I'm coming too. No, Day 1 said immediately. We need you alive. If you fail, those civilians up there won't have anyone to protect them from the remaining swarm forces. If you succeed, but take casualties, you'll need immediate medical attention. Either way, I'm more useful down there than up here. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too many soldiers die. Don't waste time arguing. I'm coming. 20 minutes later, 41 humans descended into the nest. The tunnel walls were organic, pulsing with something that might have been a heartbeat or might have been something worse. The air was thick and hot, like breathing soup. Every few meters, they passed chambers filled with swarm eggs or larvae, all of which they destroyed with chemical fire. This is wrong, Bauer whispered, watching the eggs burn. Destroying young things. Tae Yang's voice was cold. Those young things grow up to eat civilians. Do your job. They pushed deeper. The tunnel branched and rebranched, a maze designed to confuse and trap invaders. But engineer Jae-min had tapped into the colony's old terraforming equipment, using ground-penetrating sensors to map the nest. They knew where they were going. They also knew what waited for them. The first wave of swarm warriors came at them in a tunnel barely 3 meters wide. There was no room for tactics, no space for clever maneuvers. It was just brutal, grinding combat in the dark. Marines fired until their weapons overheated, then used the hot barrels as clubs. Day 1 fought beside his crew, his captain's rank meaning nothing in the blood and screaming. A warrior's claw caught his left arm, tearing through armor and flesh. He felt bones snap, felt blood spray hot across his face. But his right hand still worked, still held a pistol, still put bullets into alien flesh. When the firing stopped, 7 swarm warriors lay dead. 1 Marine wouldn't be getting up again. His name was Minho, and he'd been 23 years old. They left him there. There was no time for proper burial, no time for grief. The living kept moving deeper. Jae-min, Day 1 said, his left arm hanging useless at his side. How far to the Queen's chamber? The engineer checked his portable scanner. 200 meters, sir. But there's something else. The nest's main support chambers are directly above her. If we collapse them, the entire structure will come down. Can we do it? With enough explosives, yes. But we'd have to plant charges while fighting off whatever's protecting the Queen. And we'd only have minutes to get out before before we're buried alive. I understand. Day one looked at his team. They were exhausted, wounded, running on willpower and stubbornness. Anyone wants to turn back, speak now. Nobody spoke. Of course they didn't. They were Deathworlders. Turning back wasn't in their nature. They reached the Queen's chamber 20 minutes later. And it was worse than any of them had imagined. The chamber was massive, carved from living rock and covered in organic matter that pulsed like exposed organs. And at its center, surrounded by hundreds of warrior drones, was the Swarm Queen herself. She was 15 meters tall, a nightmare of chitin and claws and too many eyes. Her body was bloated with eggs, her mandibles dripping venom that sizzled where it hit the ground. When she saw the humans enter her domain, she made a sound that was part screech and part laughter. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere at once, translated by some biological mechanism into a language the humans could understand. "Deathworlders," the Queen said. "You came all this way to die in my nest. How delicious. How futile." The one stepped forward, his left arm hanging useless, his right hand gripping a pistol that seemed like a toy compared to the monster before him. "We came to end you. With 40 soldiers? I have 300 warriors in this chamber alone. You cannot win. Probably not. But we can make you regret it." Day one raised his pistol. "For the 40,000 civilians you terrorized. For the 17 ships you destroyed. For every life you've taken. Earth sends its regards." He fired. The shot hit the Queen in one of her many eyes. She screamed, more enraged than pain, and hell was unleashed. The swarm warriors charged from every direction. The Marines formed a defensive circle, firing outward, trying to hold a position that was impossible to hold. Mazora took acid burns across her chest. Taeyang's helmet cracked, blood running down his face. Jamin went down with claws through his leg. Kept fighting from the ground. Eun-G moved through the chaos like Death's personal assistant, stabbing emergency coagulant injections into wounded Marines, pulling them back from the edge just long enough to keep fighting. She had long ago stopped thinking about medical ethics. This wasn't about healing. This was about keeping soldiers functional for a few more minutes. Day one fought one-armed, every shot counting because he couldn't afford to miss. He watched Marines fall, watched good people die, and kept fighting because that was all he could do. Above them, in what was left of the Indomitable's bridge, Hana watched the biological sensors tracking the fight below. She could see human life signs winking out one by one. Tears ran down her face, but her hand stayed steady on the controls. She opened a communication channel to the surface team. "Captain, the charges are all placed. Jamin's remote trigger is active. You need to get out now." Day one looked around the chamber. They'd planted the explosives while fighting, placed them in support columns while warriors tried to tear them apart. 20 Marines had gone down making sure those charges were positioned correctly. "Negative," he said. "We need to make sure the Queen dies. If any of us run now, she might survive the collapse." "Sir, that's an order, Lieutenant. If we don't make it out, you're in command. Get those civilians home." The Queen laughed again, her massive body moving forward. "You cannot kill me, human. I am eternal. I am the swarm. You're about to be rubble." Day one nodded to Tae-Yang. The sergeant understood. He activated the remote trigger with his last functional hand, the other one torn off at the wrist. The explosives detonated in sequence, each charge bringing down tons of rock and biomass. The sound was the earth itself screaming. Support columns collapsed. The ceiling began to fall in massive chunks. The Queen tried to flee, but her bloated body was too slow. She watched the humans scatter, watched them run for the exit tunnel, and realized too late what they had done. The last thing the Swarm Queen saw before the darkness took her was Captain Day One, covered in blood and missing an arm, smiling at her from the tunnel entrance. Then rock and fire consumed everything. The Marines ran through collapsing tunnels, the nest dying around them. Some didn't make it. Some got caught in cave-ins or crushed by falling debris. But 19 humans emerged from that hell, blinking in daylight they weren't sure they'd ever see again. Day One collapsed outside the entrance, his body finally giving up on him. Yunji was there immediately, working to stop bleeding that should have killed him minutes ago. "We did it," he whispered. "You did it," she corrected. "Now shut up and let me work." Behind them, the ground shook as the entire nest system collapsed inward. Thousands of tons of rock and earth formed a tomb for the Swarm Queen and everything she represented. The victory tasted like blood and ashes. The Galactic Council chamber was built to inspire awe. Massive crystal pillars rose toward a domed ceiling that displayed real-time images of stars and nebulae. Representatives from 200 species sat in curved rows, each in their designated space according to ancient protocol. It was a place of civilization, of law, of order. Captain Day One stood in the center of it all, feeling very out of place. 3 weeks had passed since Viridian 7. His left arm was gone, replaced by a basic prosthetic that didn't quite fit right yet. His face carried new scars that would never fully fade. He wore his dress uniform, but it couldn't hide what he'd become in those tunnels beneath the colony. Around him, the council representatives whispered and argued. Some wanted him executed. Some wanted humanity expelled from the galactic community. A few, very few, sat silently with expressions that might have been respect or might have been fear. It was hard to tell with alien faces. The council speaker, a crystalline being whose name translated roughly as Voice of Reason, activated the chamber's central display. Images appeared. The destroyed moonbase, the burning battlecruisers, the collapsed nest, the bodies of swarm warriors scattered across the colony. "Captain Day One," the speaker said, their voice echoing through translation devices. "You stand accused of 23 violations of interstellar law. Unauthorized military action, use of prohibited weapons, destruction of property, excessive use of force, and, most seriously, conduct that brings shame upon all civilized species." Day One said nothing. What could he say? Every accusation was technically true. Lieutenant Hannah sat in the observation gallery, her hands clenched tight. She wanted to shout, to defend her captain, to make these comfortable politicians understand what they had faced. But protocol demanded silence from observers. The speaker continued. "You deployed nuclear weapons in a populated system. You used chemical weapons against biological targets. You conducted military operations without council authorization. Your actions were brutal, excessive, and barbaric." The crystalline being paused. "Do you deny these charges?" "No," Day One said simply. A murmur ran through the chamber. They had expected excuses, justifications, legal arguments. Instead, they got a single word of admission. "Then you admit you acted improperly." "I admit I broke your laws. But I don't admit I acted improperly." Day One's voice was steady, his one good hand relaxed at his side. "You sent 17 ships to Viridian 7. 17 crews who followed every rule, who respected every treaty, who tried to save those civilians the civilized way. And they all died. Every single one. That was tragic. Yes, but tragic?" Day One interrupted, his voice harder now. "It was predictable. You sent people to fight a war with one hand tied behind their backs. You sent them to die politely. And when they were gone, when 17 ships full of good people were just debris and memories, you gave up. You abandoned 40,000 civilians to the swarm because saving them would require methods you found distasteful." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several representatives demanded he be removed. Others shouted for order. The speaker's crystalline body pulsed with colors that suggested deep agitation. "You dare lecture this council on?" "I dare," Day One said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Because I was there. I watched my Marines die in those tunnels. I lost my arm to swarm claws. I have 21 names burned into my memory. People who won't be going home because they chose to save strangers instead of following regulations." He looked around the chamber at faces that couldn't meet his eyes. "You called for help. We answered. If you wanted kindness, you should have specified that in the distress call." A new voice spoke from the gallery. "Permission to address the council." Everyone turned. It was a Veltari, the insectoid species that made up most of Viridian 7's population. The one speaking was the mother who had held her children in the dark, waiting to die. The speaker seemed surprised but nodded. "You may speak." The Veltari moved to the floor, her movements uncertain in the formal setting. "My name is Silvara. I was on Viridian 7 with my children when the swarm came. For 3 weeks we hid in darkness. We heard them hunting us, heard them breaking through our defenses. We knew we were going to die." Her translator struggled to convey the emotion in her voice. "Then the humans came. And yes, they were terrifying. They fought with a violence I had never witnessed. They used weapons we consider barbaric. They showed no mercy to their enemies." She paused, her body trembling. "But they saved my children. They saved 40,000 people when no one else would. They bled for strangers. They died for species they'd never met." Silvara turned to Day One. "You ask if their methods were civilized. I don't know. I don't care. My children are alive because of them. That's all that matters to me." The chamber was silent now. Even the loudest critics had nothing to say. The speaker's colors shifted to something that might have been thoughtfulness. "The council will deliberate on this matter. Captain, you are dismissed while we—" "No." Another voice from the gallery. This time, it was Dr. Yunji, still wearing her medical uniform, still carrying the exhaustion of 3 weeks of non-stop surgery. "If you're gonna judge them, judge me too. I treated wounded Marines with stolen medical supplies. I used the colony's resources without authorization. And I'd do it again." Then Sergeant Taeyang stood, his face still healing from acid burns, missing his left hand. "Me too. I killed 300 swarm warriors. Some in combat, some in ambush, some who were trying to surrender. Judge me." One by one, every survivor of the Indomitable's crew stood. 19 Marines, 12 bridge officers, 7 engineers. All of them stepped forward to stand with their captain. The speaker looked at them, these scarred and broken warriors from the Deathworld, and seemed to struggle with what to say. Finally, they spoke. "The council will vote." The vote took 2 hours. When it was done, the result was split almost evenly. Day One received a formal reprimand for breaking treaty protocols. The Indomitable would be required to undergo inspection and retrofit to remove any banned weapon systems. Humanity would be placed on probation for 6 months, but there would be no execution, no imprisonment, no expulsion from the galactic community. There would also be something else, something never mentioned in the formal record, a secret addendum to humanity's file in the Council database. 3 words in bold letters: call only in emergencies. 6 months later, Captain Day One stood on the Indomitable's repaired bridge, looking at their new assignment. They were being sent to Sector 47, a region known for piracy and smuggling, where merchant convoys regularly disappeared. "They're using us as a deterrent," Hana said, reading the orders over his shoulder. "They put humans in the dangerous sectors, and suddenly the danger goes away. Are you complaining?" "No, sir. Just observing." She smiled slightly. It's better than pushing paper at a desk somewhere. The ship's communication system beeped. An incoming message from a transport convoy passing through their sector. The convoy captain was asking for escort through a known pirate zone. Day 1 activated the response channel. This is the Indomitable. We'll accompany your convoy. Any pirates in the area should know we don't negotiate. The convoy captain's relief was obvious in their voice. Thank you, Captain. We heard what happened at Viridian 7. We're honored to have Earth's protection. The communication ended. Day 1 settled into his command chair, his prosthetic arm feeling a little more natural than it had yesterday dot across the galaxy. In a dark meeting room on a forgotten station, that pirate lord looked at intelligence reports. His target was a rich merchant convoy, lightly defended and fat with cargo. An easy score. Then he saw which ship was escorting them. The Indomitable. The Deathworld ship Dot, he remembered the stories. The destroyed swarm fleet. The collapsed nest. The humans who fought like demons and won against impossible odds. He canceled the raid. It wasn't worth it. Nothing was worth facing humans who had already proven they would do anything to complete their mission. Dot in her comfortable home on Viridian 7. Silvara tucked her children into bed. They were safe now. The colony was rebuilding. Life was returning to normal, or as normal as it could be after 3 weeks of horror. Her youngest, Kilsin, looked up at her with wide eyes. Mother, tell me again about the humans. What about them, little one? Are they really as scary as people say? Silvara thought about Sergeant Taeyang, covered in blood and scars, kneeling down to tell her child that fear was normal. She thought about Dr. Yoonji, working 30 hours straight to save lives. She thought about Captain Day 1, standing before the council and refusing to apologize for saving them. Yes, she said softly. They're terrifying. They come from a world that tried to kill them every day, and they learn to kill back. They fight without mercy. They don't give up. They don't surrender. They're everything we were taught civilized beings should never be. Then why do I feel safe knowing they're out there? Silvara smiled and stroked her child's head. Because sometimes, little one, the universe needs monsters to fight other monsters. And humanity chose to be our monsters. The kind that protect instead of prey. She turned off the light and left the room, looking up at the stars through her window. Somewhere up there, the Indomitable was on patrol, keeping the darkness at bay.